Hello, you are listening to Trump Republic Radio. It is July 26, 2017. I'm your host, Enzo Quesada, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Bobby Hester.
Hello, everyone.
And this week, we have a very interesting guest, since the theme of the week is Russian conspiracy theories, so we had to bring in probably the biggest expert on conspiracy theories, at least in Minnesota, but probably the United States. Jesse Ventura.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Mr. Fester, Mr. Quesadilla. I love being here exercising my constitutional rights. And I'll be exercising all my major muscle groups today as well. Hopefully, if I could get a spotter.
Well, I don't think we're going to be lifting on the podcast. I once was challenged to a lifting contest on the podcast, but I didn't want to do that.
Well, you know, I'm kind of tired anyway. I just motorcycled up here from Oaxaca, Mexico. I don't know if you know, I've been spending part of the year there. I just got so fed up with the crime and corruption of America, I decided to go to Mexico.
Isn't it worse there, though?
You know, I just try to stay drunk most of the time and just kind of, put earphones in when I'm trying to sleep, so that's kind of how I get through it.
Well, you know what? You know who else is drunk all the time?
Who?
The Russians. All they do is drink vodka.
Always drinking vodka. That's Russophobic, though. That's a stereotype. We're not supposed to stereotype people.
I happen to know through my own investigations that they really like beetroot juice as well.
Well, instead of being Russophobic, how about we just be xenophobic and blame Russia for all of our problems?
That is what we're going to be talking about today, because
exactly.
that's the entire Russian narrative. Hillary Clinton lost the election because the Russians apparently hacked the election, quote unquote. That's the whole big claim, and that's what we've been talking about for over a year now, like a year and a half to this point. We compiled yesterday for about 3 hours a timeline of pretty much every single major event in the Russian narrative as it's commonly known. Since it is a narrative, it's a story, it's fiction, and we're going to go through that in pretty intense detail.
We're also going to be going through some Comey testimonies before Congress, as well as, when we get to it, we're going to do the interview that Vladimir Putin had with Megyn Kelly. So
yeah.
Those are both going to be really, really fun. We're going to be doing some more imitations.
This is going to be a very interesting podcast. I'll just say that now.
Well, let's not waste too much more time. Let's start getting into it.
We? So the first thing that we put in our timeline was back in March of 2016, the U.S. intelligence community declassified an assessment on Russian interference. This was the initial document which really incited people to the potential of the Russians, quote-unquote, hacking the election. That document, let me pull it up for a second.
The document was released, you said, in March 2016, am I correct?
That's when it was declassified.
Okay.
That essentially said it was the DHS, the FBI, another agency.
It was
generally the intelligence agencies.
I have here it's the DHS, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA.
Yeah, that's what I was
Those
forgetting.
were the agencies involved.
Those were the main agencies, and they did a look at what has been happening as far as Russia's cyber warfare. Because I will not deny that Russia has these things. I mean, the United States does as well. We have cyber warfare. The one that they have in Russia, the big one that they claim does all the bad stuff, it's the GRU. When it comes to things like, I guess we can break it down from this point. The Russian hacking. When they say that Russia hacked the election, they want you to believe that the machines themselves were hacked and votes went to Donald Trump when they weren't supposed to. I think when they just say Russia hacked the election, that's what they want you to believe. But the thing about, voting systems they're not connected to any sort of like internet grid at all. So from that aspect, the idea that they even use the terminology Russia hacked the election is absurd.
They would physically have to go to actual electronic voting booths in person in order to add extra votes.
Yeah.
And there's no way they did that, especially in the swing states.
Well, my crack investigative team fanned out across the world, and I told them, you guys better concentrate on the most aggressive powers ever. And you know that to be, of course,
The United States?
St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Oh.
Of course, followed not far behind by Trinidad and Tobago. Okay? But you have this Russia thing and it keeps coming up. So I've got to say, I will go to Russia, I will knock on their door and say, brother, I was a governor, I was a Navy SEAL, and I deserve some answers.
Well, we're hoping to get some answers in this podcast. That's definitely what we're going to do. But,
let's bring it back to I think this would be a good point to mention why the intelligence agencies aren't the most important agencies to trust. One thing that they always say on the fake news is, oh, are you not believing what the intelligence agencies have to say? What makes you know better than they do? Even though that's an appeal to authority, so that's a fallacy. You still have to show evidence for an argument. So,
but it's they use the word intelligence, though. How are you going to argue with that?
And the thing is, though, is about, the whole, intelligence agencies believing things. There's been several declassified documents, especially one that we're going to get to, the more famous one. At no point did it ever actually have any evidence to show that Russia either hacked the election or even interfered.
It's just a premonition.
It was a premonition and a quote-unquote consensus. And the consensus was made just by them saying, yeah, it probably happened, even though, like I said, they have absolutely no evidence to it.
So, for this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about the WikiLeaks and all the different hacking that happened, because hacking did happen. There were leaked documents, which, were blamed on the Russians, even though, when we're going to get to it, definitely didn't happen that way. Seth Rich, of course, is the first thing that comes to mind. But, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry on that.
Well, since you lost your train of thought, let's continue on with the timeline.
Yeah.
Then. So the next thing that we have up in the timeline is in May of 2016. And at that point, James Clapper, he was the NSA director, I believe?
The Clapper?
Is that correct, Enzo?
I believe he was.
There's a shot you can get yourself in the butt for that, to get rid of it. I used to do it all the time when I was serving in the Philippines.
Ouch, that would hurt.
He was former United States Director of National Intelligence,
right.
James Clapper.
And what he did was he said, and this was in May 2016, he said that he has seen, quote, indications of, quote, attempted cyber attacks on both the campaigns, Hillary Clinton's and Donald Trump's. But he did not provide any evidence to say who was actually behind it. Now, this is important because this is what really started people getting the idea in their head that there's actual hacking
this
going
could
on.
happen. This is before any sort of leak. So the Russian narrative really didn't set itself. It was just the rumblings in the intelligence agency saying, yeah, this could be happening. We've been seeing potential activity. So we go next on the timeline, and we're gonna go to something that has been the news a lot recently, actually.
Yes.
But wasn't talked about at the time. So in May of 2016, Donald Trump Jr. received his first email from the scary Russian lawyer that they've been playing up on the TV for the last couple of weeks. Natalia Veselnitskaya is her name.
That's a pretty suspicious name. I would have to investigate that further. It doesn't sound very legitimate to me.
Well, it's a Russian name, so you don't probably hear names like that often.
Now, she was denied her not permit. She was denied a visa into the United States several times.
Yes.
Before this happened, and they always say she was this quote unquote Kremlin connected lawyer. Even though when you actually look into it, she has hardly any connections to the Kremlin at all.
Well, I applied for a visa one time, and they told me no, so I just went across the street and applied to MasterCard.
But if you read the email, and Trump Jr. himself, he famously posted that email on Twitter, the screenshots of it.
Yes.
And within the email, the person who was emailing him, which was not the same person he actually met with, keep that in mind. Because the person he was emailing said that the lawyer had information which could help hurt the Clinton campaign, or had damning information on her campaign. Which, by the way, that's not illegal to gather information, even if the source
not at all.
is
not
a foreign agent. But that
what she was a Russian lobbyist in Washington, D.C. She promoted Russian interests. Okay, this is something that every country does in Washington, D.C. There are Russian citizens in the United States. They want to have a collective representative voice, so they have lobbyists. And, the next thing that we're going to get into is the meeting itself. The meeting happened on June 9th. At that meeting, there was Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner. Was Steve Bannon there?
He wasn't on the campaign at the time. He wasn't on the campaign yet.
I think, was it Paul Manafort?
People are saying that Paul Manafort was there as well as a translator.
Yes. Now, when this meeting happened, it only lasted about 20 minutes.
Not only did it last 20 minutes, or only 20 minutes, but she never actually gave him any information.
No.
She had no information to hurt the Clinton campaign. In fact, they said the main topic of the campaign was just trying to get there's a whole issue of Russian adoption, for Russian kids trying to be adopted in the U.S.
Yeah.
That program ended several years ago, and they're trying to get that started again.
Which
that was the main topic.
I personally know a Russian person that was a child adoption to the United States.
Oh, I have a family member who I have a family member in my extended family who is one of the
this
final
is
people to do
obviously
that.
something that they care a lot about.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's what they talked mostly about. And Sean Hannity was she told the Russian lawyer told people afterwards that she didn't give any information. And Donald Trump Jr. told Sean Hannity that she didn't give him any information.
So basically, as far as meetings go, it was basically like he was left with blue balls.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Kind of descriptive. But
yeah, he got nothing out of it from her. She didn't give him anything. However, that made them look very, very bad.
I know, Kushner left 5 minutes in the meeting. It was so irrelevant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it made them look bad because he talked to a Russian person.
And we've discussed this on the main show a couple weeks ago when the story first broke. But if you actually look at some of the email chains, the person who was emailing Donald Trump Jr. was using very cryptic language and very key buzzwords when he was talking. Now, at this time, there was, the starting, like we said, the rumblings in the intelligence community looking for, any interference by the Russians at all. And if you go back and you read those emails, the guy used very weird language. Like he would say, are you ready to meet the Russian lawyer from Russia that's flying in from Russia with, stuff like that, essentially.
Oh, yeah. I remember this is a point we were making a while back as well. It's very likely she could have just been a plant.
It is. And, she was a well-known lobbyist in D.C. People knew who she was.
No, you go back to... this is the funny thing. There's photos of her with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as well. Why is it only a controversy if a Russian lady talks to Donald Trump Jr.?
Red-handed. Red-handed.
Very red-handed. They got their hand stuck in the... But no, the point still stands. People knew who she was. It's not like she was some random person who just flew in. She had been there already. Yes. She was let in by the Obama administration. They gave her her visa once the time came around. Like you said, she worked as a lobbyist in D.C. And so, it's just weird that all this information finally broke after it seemed like the Russia story had died out for a few weeks after Comey's testimony. We're going to get to that later. But, it seems like at this point, they're just trying to dig up anything at all. I mean, if you remember back when that Donald Trump's tax return was leaked to Rachel Maddow, back in, I believe this was in March, she said that, he sold a property on one of his golf courses to a person with a Russian last name.
He sold a plane to a Russian person for $95 million, and then that guy happened to be in Las Vegas at the same time Trump is doing a Trump rally.
Yeah, because it's not like Las Vegas isn't a city where people like to go to a lot.
In their
But that being said,
planes.
people made fun of her when she said that because they thought, you've really got nothing on him now. Because if you're trying to say that his quote-unquote links to Russia is selling a property 10 years ago to someone with a Russian last name. But what's interesting is, I'm kind of getting slightly off topic here. I'm going to get back to on topic here in a second.
Yeah.
But now, the current Russian investigation by Congress, or by Mueller, they said they're looking at his past business deals.
Yes.
That really tells you they have absolutely nothing.
Oh, no, they have to look through anything that could possibly... And the reason they want to do that is because they just want to find any sort of general corruption, anything,
right,
even if it wasn't related to Russians, so they can find something to get Donald Trump out of the White House.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I tell you, this conspiracy's starting to smell like an onion. And like all onions, you gotta peel them every layer after layer. And then you've gotta put it in a pan and let it caramelize. And I think that's what's going on right now. The caramelizing of the onion.
Let's peel back that metaphor for a second and move on to the next thing.
So the next thing that we have on our timeline
was the DNC. The convention was in...
The conventions were in July. Right.
Guccifer was the first one that leaked, though.
But
that was prior to Bethesda.
Right, but remember the day before that, though.
Yes.
The day before the Guccifer 2.0 leaks were dropped.
June 14th.
Right, this is June 14th. The DNC officials blamed Russia for breaching their computer network. They said that they were trying to gain opposition research for Trump. Russia then denied that they were behind that.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get, past this stuff, but we've talked on the program about the DNC leaks and how there's actual evidence to show that they were most likely copied on site rather than were actually hacked in.
I actually want to bring up the research that shows that for a second. We talked about it. It was an article for Zero Hedge. It was about 3 weeks ago at this point. There's new meta-analysis that emerged from a document that was published on July 10th from an independent researcher known as the Forensicator, which suggested that files eventually published by the Guccifer 2.0 persona. Guccifer 2.0 was an individual on Twitter that was doing it. He had a website as well.
Right.
That's where the very first leaks came from. Were likely initially downloaded by a person with physical access to a computer, possibly connected to the internal DNC network. The individual likely used a USB drive to copy the information. The groundbreaking analysis irrevocably destroys the Russian hacking narrative. Now, what they did in this research is they actually checked the type of metadata that was created when you're transferring these files, and just by the way that it transfers over, you can tell by which medium it was done through, and that's why they know that this was done locally and not through some sort of Russian intelligence agency. If you'd like to look further into that, maybe we could put that article in the description. I think that's a good one.
We can include that one in the description.
But so the very first leaks were the Guccifer leaks, and this is what I think I want to get into some of the things that were actually talked about during the Guccifer leaks. Now, one of the most prominent things that we learned from those leaks was the favoritism of the Democratic National Convention that they had towards Hillary Clinton. You think, who was the DNC chair at the time?
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz. You know what she was doing in 2008?
Playing ping pong with Vladimir Putin.
No, she was Clinton's campaign co-chair.
Sorry, I
in
think
2008,
I was asleep right
the primaries against Barack Obama.
Sorry, I was nodding off there for a second.
Only Republicans talk to Russians.
I'm back on the case. I'm on the case.
So this is where you can see the initial favoritism that was placed towards Hillary Clinton heading into the primaries. You can look at the emails that they were sending around at the time, and it seems like they assumed that she was going to be the nominee already, straight from the get-go, because this was, in the middle of the primaries when this happened.
Yeah, this was actually...
Well, the emails that they found were prior to the primaries.
Correct.
When this was released, it was towards the end of the primaries, though, when Bernie was winning all those states, and then, nothing at the convention.
And it was neck and neck, and it could have been Colonel Sanders the whole time. Maybe they threw it to keep him out of office. Who knows?
Well, I enjoy my fried chicken, but I don't like
another
Bernie
thing,
Sanders very
actually,
much.
from the Gooster leaks that I want to talk about in regards to the Bernie Sanders stuff was there are actually stories that you can read through these internally released memos that they're circulating around, where they're blatantly making fake news. They were making these fake stories of quote unquote Bernie bros doing disparaging things to kind of besmirch the name of Bernie Sanders. And this is stuff that they were, openly talking around about. But, the media never talked about that they were doing this at all. When we get into some of the more further leaks, there's going to be better evidence for some of the stuff as well. Another thing that we know is... never mind. I was thinking of something in a different leak. So many leaks we have to talk about to explain this Russia stuff.
Yeah, there's so many leaks and so much information within the leaks, it's hard to remember what was in which one.
I think it's important to touch on Goofster 2.0 because it was the beginning of the Russian conspiracy, in a sense. And it showed us some information on the inner workings of the DNC that the DNC didn't want to get out, which is why they say they're attacking democracy, because citizens aren't allowed to be informed about corruption when they're voting. That might change their votes. That's the entire argument that they're making.
Now, it's interesting you also noted that they were blatantly spreading fake news around.
Yes.
I was going to say earlier, but I didn't get to the point. That's one of the other things that people say, that Russia was, quote-unquote, influenced the election by spreading fake news around about Hillary Clinton. But, from...
I think we can go into that. I think there is some legitimacy to fake news.
Yeah.
There is. Oh, no, of course there is. No, I'm sorry to cut you off.
I was going to say, though, is, just by remembering back everything that happened, just, living through the election the way that everyone did, being someone like us who just, paid attention to every single thing that happened, I remember many, many, many more fake stories being spread around about Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton. What's interesting is a lot of the quote-unquote fake news stories that were spread about Hillary Clinton ended up being the truth. They were just labeled as fake news by the press and the mainstream media.
Yeah.
When in reality, they were actual legitimate stories, whereas stuff about Donald Trump ended up being redacted 2 days later.
So, let's get into the topic of fake news, since that actually does play a lot into the Russian narrative. So, I do not deny that Russia does have influence campaigns. They did this in the Ukraine. That's why, half the country is, pro Vladimir Putin. That's why they embraced, the Russians when they marched into Crimea and annexed the whole thing and had that referendum. Vladimir Putin, Crimea voted to join the Russian Federation by 90%. He's a very well-liked guy. Now, it's InfoWars, not InfoWars .com.
InfoWars.
I know, Jesse Ventura, you've probably been on there.
Many times. I love fighting with information.
I guess I do as well. But they do create fake stories. They would use Facebook to try and promote narratives. The thing was, at the time in the Ukraine, both sides were doing it. My thing is, though, it's not illegal to do that. And there was fake news during the United States election from Russians. I don't deny that. but it was so small and blatantly fake. Like those sites that they were pointing to right when the fake news word was getting popular, they'd point to the sites where they were making fake news, and you have to be really stupid to fall for it.
Yeah, it's like clickbaity article type stuff.
Yeah, it was just random clickbait. It's not to the level of fake news that we live with now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just important to state that there is Russian influence campaigns. But,
You know what I think the answer to that is?
Yeah.
I think we resurrect Joseph McCarthy and make him the chairman of the DNC.
Oh, if McCarthy was around nowadays, he'd be having a field day.
It'd be fun.
But
yeah, there's a lot of communists.
That's a little off topic.
But just countries are allowed to try to influence. It's on the internet. That's the thing. They're using the internet. The internet doesn't belong to the United States. If there's people,
no borders.
Yeah, if people are influenced by stuff that the Russians put on the internet, it's not a crime at all. That's a legitimate thing to do. I'm flustered to when I have to even talk about that because it just seems like common knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go into the next big thing that happened in July. In July, the FBI began investigation into any sort of Trump-Russia connection. We also, in July 18th, we had the incident where Jeff Sessions and the Russian ambassador talked at the Heritage Foundation event, which...
I heard that one of them bummed a toothpick off the other. And I want to know about that because that seems nefarious.
Well, you got to have shiny teeth. But Jeff Sessions, at the time, he was on the chair. He was not the chairman, but he was on which Senate?
He was in the committee for Trump's foreign policy.
But which Senate committee was he on? He was on one of the Senate committees. It was Foreign Affairs. I do not remember
the Senate committee.
I'm not sure.
It probably is foreign.
But either way, he talked with a lot of ambassadors during his time. All the time, just as part of that being his job. So the fact that he talked to the Russian ambassador at one time meant absolutely nothing. We don't even know what they talked about.
Yeah, it brings it back to the thing is you're not allowed to talk to anyone who's Russian at this point. It's absurd. It's not illegal to do that at all.
Are you serious? Damn it.
100%. There's no laws that forbid people being Russian in the United States.
Okay, well.
But the next thing that happened on our timeline was one of the big turning points. This was on July 22nd of 2016. This is when WikiLeaks released their first batch of 2,000 DNC emails.
Of the Podesta emails.
No, this was just the DNC emails first. The Podesta emails were later. This was just This was very, very similar to the Guccifer emails, whereas the Guccifer emails were a lot of stuff that happened before the election. This was stuff that happened during. That was more recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember what was some of the stuff with those leaks?
Well, this was some of the stuff that confirmed the Guccifer leaks, because the Guccifer leaks was actual documents and whatnot, or it had a lot of documents and whatnot, showing that there was favoritism and all that stuff. Whereas this one was actual conversations, up to even a couple of weeks earlier, proving that information that was previously released was correct.
This is where we started to see some of the more covert stuff that Hillary was doing at the time. This in tandem with... That's when, the WikiLeaks campaign really started with the flooding of emails, rigging the consistent leaks, and those leaks went on until, the election.
Yeah, even after the election.
Even after the election.
I don't know, it just sounds to me like they were just sitting around eating pizza the whole time. I mean, weren't there every other email was about pizza, wasn't it? That's what my investigative team has reported to me.
There were emails about pizza. That is a conspiracy theory in and of itself that could be its own episode, even though I don't really believe in Pizzagate stuff so much. But
yeah, but there's one more thing that, that also happened in July that's worth noting.
Yes.
And this was 12 days before WikiLeaks released their first batch of the DNC emails. On July 10th was the date that Seth Rich was murdered.
Yes.
And it's widely believed that he might have been the person who was behind the DNC emails. Because he had access to them due to his job. And,
He was a disgruntled Bernie supporter that could see what was going on with this, favoritism towards Hillary Clinton that you can see in the emails. It's actually kind of funny. You think about the lawsuit that's going on between the advocates for, the Bernie supporters against the DNC. The DNC is making the case now that you're not entitled to, fair elections and primaries. Which is, the entire thing about, the Russia conspiracy is, we had an unfair election. Even though the DNC, had an unfair election, blatantly right before this one.
Classic bait and switch.
Very much so.
Very much so. One of the things that came out of those initial leaks that we saw at the start of the DNC, because that's or no, these aren't the DNC. Oh yeah, these are the DNC
yes, they
leaks.
were.
For when the convention was going on, because it hit the first day of the convention. It was madness. It was beautiful to watch. But one of the first ones that Trump brought up during the second debate was the big thing about open borders that she wanted to do. She wanted to create that free trade, open borders, North American union.
Mm-hmm.
We want to talk about Russian control of the United States, giving up American sovereignty to join a North American union where there's no borders. That's some collusion, if you ask me.
Yeah,
that's some very globalist intentions from a very shadowy elite working through the establishment of the Democratic National Convention.
Also, they could get cheap Chinese clothes.
My clothes aren't made in China. I buy American. But 2 days after the first batch of DNC emails were released, and like we said, this happened the first day of the convention. 2 days later, Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned as the chairman of the DNC. Yes. Now, she was implicated in a lot of those emails as showing favoritism
tons.
And whatnot.
For the most part.
So, there's no denying it. She resigned because of the fact that these emails were released and the information became public.
But she was given a position in the Clinton campaign.
Yeah, wasn't she still her campaign manager or something at that point?
She was put in the Clinton campaign after she, resigned from the DNC as the chair.
Sounds legit.
Now, this was at the same time where a lot of people in the DNC were starting to say, oh, it was Russia behind us. Russia was the one who did it. They were the one who hacked it.
Wikileaks is Russia. Wikileaks is Russia.
Yeah, that's where this that narrative first started. Now, 3 days later, after Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned, on July 27th, this is when Trump held that press conference. Now, this was the last press conference he held during the campaign. And this was when he made the joke, when he said, well, if Russia did do it, if you're listening, I hope you find the emails that the 30,000 emails that Hillary deleted. It was a joke. If you listen to him saying it, it sounded like he was using a sarcastic tone. But this is when everyone said that, Trump is telling the Russians to hack everything. He's calling
for the Russians to hack his opponent.
This is treason. He's calling for it. When, anyone who actually listened to the press conference saw it, watches the video, it's clearly obvious he was telling a joke. He later said, I was being sarcastic, because he was. Yet they decided to just go with this narrative the entire time that, this is Trump directly colluding with Russia. He's telling them to hack it. He's committing treason. When, it's just insanity that people actually believe that. Now, the next thing that we have on the timeline is actually not until September. Now, on September 8th, Trump did an interview with Larry King on his show. Now, that show at that time aired on several different networks.
Yes.
And one of the networks that aired that interview was RT.
Oh, buddy.
Right. Russia Today, which is
bingo.
It's like the BBC. It's like the Russian BBC
it's
equivalent.
State-sponsored.
Russian propaganda.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Now, like I said, it's not the only network that aired that.
Yes.
But it was one of them. And the Democrats used that to say that this was Russia spreading propaganda because of the fact that an interview of an American with another American happened to air on a English-speaking Russian TV channel.
Yeah.
That's direct evidence that Trump's colluding with Russia.
Well, it was on Al Jazeera, so I'm pretty sure Al Qaeda was in on it too.
Yeah.
See, this is the moment in the Russian narrative where, like, anyone being Russian was, like, pretty much collusion.
Right.
Anything that was Russian instantly is some sort of connection we need to look into.
Absolutely.
Gary Kasparov, he played chess, so if you play chess like Gary Kasparov, you are a Russian colluder.
Well,
Exactly.
Trump does like to play 4D chess. Now, later that day, or on that same day, on September 8th, Jeff Sessions, he was still a senator at the time, he met with dignitaries of several different countries, including that of Russia. So again, this is kind of like his old meeting, like I was saying.
Yeah.
He met with several different countries' dignitaries, including Russia. It was not just meeting with Russia.
But this is, again, another instance where they pointed, oh, Jeff Sessions, you were with a Russian person.
Right.
Were you trying to get them to help you win the election?
Now, the next thing that's on the timeline is
September 8th is a precedent, unlike the Russophobia.
Yes. But the next thing that came out was October 7th. Now, October was kind of an important date, or just an important month, because it was right before the election, so like everyone's eyes was on everything. Russia hysteria was in full-blown mode. It was at this point when, me personally, I'm going to use like an anecdote here, but it seemed like, the Clinton campaign and the DNC and just the left in general was just spreading this Russia stuff, thinking that, if they lose, they're going to blame it on Russia. And I remember telling people this. I told a lot of people that I believed it. I was strictly saying, I was like, if Hillary loses, she's going to blame it on Russia, and they're going to harp this thing. And that's exactly what's happened. So I guess, I was right on that.
Which is funny. Do you remember also, prior to the election, they were talking about, how voter fraud's impossible.
Yeah.
But then they claimed that the Russians caused voter fraud that won Trump the election.
And
but voter fraud doesn't happen.
Yeah. Now, on October 7th, the U.S. intelligence... Two things happened on October 7th. But the first thing that happened was the U.S. intelligence agencies said that Russia was behind the attempted hacks. Now, I remember this because this was another time when they didn't provide any evidence.
Yes.
This was a common theme. They never provided
any evidence.
Yeah,
we're supposed to believe these intelligence agencies always at the word without any sort of evidence at all.
Intelligence. I mean, they just say it. It's right there. Intelligence.
Which, think about this for a second. This is the Obama DHS.
Right.
This is Obama's FBI. Do they have an interest in Hillary Clinton still being, win the election so they can keep their jobs? Because if Trump wins, they might get shuffled out, as we saw with some of them.
Yeah. Now, this was also around the same time that Pussygate came out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So everyone that hated Trump was like...
Pussygate was the same day as Podesta emails.
And this was the same day as Russia, as the U.S. intelligence agencies.
I remember, October 7th was 2 days prior to the second debate.
Right, because...
And when the Wikileaks, the Podesta email is released, Pussygate happened about an hour later.
Yeah,
so
right after it.
The media had this tape. They were sitting on it, waiting to use it at the perfect moment to run cover for Hillary Clinton. Right when all the most incriminating emails, because the Podesta ones are the most incriminating. We can get into some of those.
When the Podesta emails were released that day.
Do you remember the email they had where the subject line was needy Latinos and one easy call? Remember when they called Hispanics tacos?
Taco Bowl voters?
Taco Bowl voters. It was interesting to see these people that try to represent the interests of, Hispanics, disparaging them so openly. All they really care about is these votes. Also, some other things that we saw out of the Podesta emails was Hillary saying it's important to have a public and a private stance on things.
Right.
That was a fun one.
Fakest person in the whole world.
We also know from the Podesta leaks that Hillary Clinton was fed questions on the debates.
Right, by Donna Brazile.
Donna Brazile, which she's admitted to at this point now to doing.
And she worked for CNN at the time.
Yeah. Which, was CNN doing that debate?
Yeah, that was the CNN debate. They gave the questions beforehand to Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile, working with CNN, then gave the questions to Hillary before the debate.
Okay, so this is why this stuff blows my mind. Because we're talking about a media, like the news media purposely, like, rigging, like, a debate for Hillary Clinton, but that's not, like, a threat to our democracy, as they always say.
No, sir. Grabbing a pussy is a threat to democracy. I'll tell you that.
Well, remember, that was the email that was talking about one of the debates that Hillary had with Bernie. This was one of the DNC debates. So this was like something that already happened, months beforehand.
Yeah, so there's nothing you can do about it.
But, what else was in the Podesta emails? Do you have anything else?
They called Bernie a doofus.
Well, he was, so they were right
They
on
disparaged Catholics some. There was some stuff on how Hillary Clinton's actually, like, wary of refugees, which was interesting because, she ran on the platform of, like, increasing the amount of refugees that we bring into,
by
like...
500%.
500% in the course of, like, 4 years. But personally saying that, like, there is reason to believe that there's extremists in these refugees' midst.
Mm-hmm.
But they could be useful. You never know.
Another thing that we saw from the Podesta emails was that there was some certain journalists that they actually favored to write stories about Hillary Clinton because they always turned out to be favorable. There was some stuff on
spirit cooking.
Spirit cooking. That's an interesting topic in and of itself. I'm just trying to remember. There's so many things. It was thousands of emails.
Yeah.
Not every email obviously meant anything, but just the stuff that you see that was going on is so immense, and this is, direct evidence of things that we can prove.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to know this stuff as the general public. Otherwise, that would be, giving into Russian influence. Now, doing what Russia would want us to do.
Now, speaking of things that Russia wants to do, CNN published an article. This article was published later on, but it was talking about, this was on October 12th. They said that Russia was behind a hack of Florida voting centers before the election.
Yes.
Now, when this came out, they said that, this is direct proof that, they're trying to hack the voting centers. But in reality, what ended up happening was there were several laptops that got, like, malicious emails, the type that everybody gets.
Yes.
And inside, and now keep in mind, the people never even clicked on the emails. They just received the emails. Now, these were on laptops that were, like, city or county laptops specifically for, like, the voting center. And the email address that was, part of that received, like, 2 or 3 of those, like, malicious emails. They never clicked on them. But they said that the emails were sourced back, and the type of virus that was, like, linked inside the email was a type of virus that is commonly used by hackers in Russia. Now, it's also commonly used by thousands and thousands of other people across the planet.
Yeah.
But it's commonly used by Russia.
So that means
and
it's
they
Russia.
had no evidence the email came from Russia or a Russian. All they said was, the file that was attached to it was a file that's commonly used by Russians to get information.
Yeah.
And, what's interesting is there were also thousands of other computers across the country that had nothing to do with, voting sites that also received those emails, that also were infected by viruses. So, they're starting to say, this is, direct evidence that Russia's trying to hack the election, when it's, flimsy evidence at best.
I think it's direct evidence that, Canada's trying to sell us Viagra.
Well, luckily I don't need that yet. But, the next...
That's all that's ever in my inbox.
No one's wanting to hack you.
Anyways, the next month that we have in the timeline is, definitely probably the most important month of the entire...
November 2016?
Yes. In November of 2016. And this was obviously the election. But before the election, 2 days prior, on November 6th, the Guardian newspaper, they claimed that the Russian government was paying thousands of people to be pro-Trump trolls on Twitter. Now, their evidence was saying, oh, it's those accounts that have like 4 followers and like 16 tweets, and they're all like at the exact same time and all this different kind of BS. But a lot of people, especially people on the left, came to believe that was also including like a lot of more famous Twitter accounts that had several thousand followers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll admit, I'm very active on Twitter. The election's really what made me active on Twitter, even though I'd had my account for several years. But some of the people that they were blaming were like, oh, you're a paid Russian troll, were some of the famous people that I followed. And I knew for a fact these people were not Russin trolls. All they do is they were people who liked Trump, and they shared a lot of stuff that was pro-Trump. Or they would, go into poll analysis to like say, is this stuff accurate? Is it not? If I had to, if you put the gun to my head and made me decide, I would tell you these were the people that made me absolutely believe, yeah, Trump's going to win this thing. Like, we're not going to lose it. If I had not followed some of those accounts, I would have thought Hillary was going to win. And I was absolutely certain Trump was going to win. And that was because smart people who made smart, rational arguments were some of these people that the left is saying, yo, you're just a paid Russian troll. Don't pay any information to you.
It's such projection to say that you're a paid Russian troll, because you remember what Hillary Clinton herself, or it wasn't herself doing, but it was she had a PAC.
Yeah.
Called Correct the Record.
And that's still active today.
Yeah, where they were paying people to shill for Hillary Clinton against Bernie supporters during the campaign on Reddit and Facebook.
It's like 7 cents a tweet or something like that.
Yeah.
Or that might be Share Blue.
So, like, we're supposed to, buy into, like, Russia's hiring all these people and, like, that's, destroying our democracy, while Hillary is doing, like, the same exact thing that you're accusing Russians of doing. But no one talks about that. That's not news.
Those on the left still today will call people Putin bots or paid Russian trolls. Like, to this day, that narrative still exists.
Yeah.
Just simply because someone, has a low number of followers and posts something pro-Trump, that automatically makes you a paid Russian troll. But 2 days later, Trump ends up winning the election.
Those rubles are so valuable.
I know. I mean, if I was a paid Russian troll, I've yet to see a paycheck for that.
I'd love to get donations from the podcast.
I've tweeted thousands of things since the election. Like, you know how much money I would have earned if I would have been paid 7 cents a tweet?
A lot.
I could be ranking in the dough right now, but no.
We should just sell out and be Hillary shills.
Oh,
I couldn't do that.
I'd kill myself.
But yeah, let's go on to December now.
Well, no, there's one more thing for November.
One more thing for...
Now, this was on November 24th, the Washington Post, which, always has... Which, I'll say this before I get into this. From this point forward, it seemed like every single Russia story came from the Washington Post. It was always the Washington Post reporting. And, at that time, I didn't trust the Washington Post. No one on the right trusts the Washington Post. But everyone knew this was BS, because it was coming from the Washington Post.
The Amazon Washington Post,
yes,
as the president announced.
Trump likes to call it, because it's owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon. But, that being said, every single Russia story broke from the Washington Post.
Yes.
You'd think that any other network would break something, but no, it was always the Washington Post. It was always at 5 p.m., right when, stuff would dominate the breaking news cycle for that night. And it always happened. Now, this story in particular that I'm talking about on November 24th, Washington Post published a report with an anonymous source, I might add.
Yes.
Saying that Russia was trying to spread fake news to help Trump and hurt Clinton. Now, what's interesting is they later retracted that story because of the fact that the source was made up and there was no evidence. And this was one of the few things that they actually retracted. So
they admit they were wrong.
They did. They admitted they were wrong. They admitted it was fake. Now, there's going to be a few more things that they have to retract later or get proven wrong, but that one was the very first time that they had a breaking story that everyone was like, oh my God, the sky is falling.
But with all these fake news stories that came out about Russia since, the election, it's all about what you initially put out.
Yeah.
When you tweet out the story of, oh, Trump did something with a Russian, so, he stole the election. Tons of, retweets and whatnot, likes on Twitter. the retraction won't get a tenth of the stuff that you see.
Yeah, and even to this day, there's been
still happens that
there's
way.
Screenshots. Yeah. An initial claim will get like 4,000 retweets. The retraction gets about 50. And that's a narrative that that still happens.
But they're not held responsible for doing this stuff.
Never.
They say democracy dies in darkness. Well, Washington Post, I say you are the darkness.
I agree.
Washington
Post terrible.
Now we can get into what happened in December.
So the first thing that we have to go over is this Kushner stuff.
And keep in mind, this was during the transition, so Trump was already the nominee at this point.
So Kushner was meeting with several different ambassadors, and this is where the big stuff about him creating a back channel to Russia started coming into the news.
Right.
But the back channel stuff is commonplace.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. They do this stuff with communicate.
RFK did it one time, and it saved us from nuclear holocaust.
Yeah, it's very important to have these kind of communications links with these nations you might not have great relations with. Because guess what? You're still on the same planet. It's important to communicate this stuff. But it's Russia, so
And it's also It's also commonplace for transition teams to meet with, people from other countries.
Of course, you're about to be the ruling regime of the United States. You need to get this stuff planned together.
And what's interesting is, on that December 1st meeting that Kushner had with different ambassadors, they didn't even discuss creating the back channel. They never even talked about it at that meeting. Even though that's when they said, they tried to make it. It never happened.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next thing that happened on the timeline.
There's two things that happened December 9th. The first one is something that's going to come up later, but it's just kind of something that happened. John McCain, our favorite senator, he hand-delivered memos to FBI Director Comey, and one of those was the infamous Steele dossier, the PP tape one, the Golden Showers. Now, that story didn't break until later. But
on BuzzFeed,
but that didn't break until January. Now, the only reason I'm mentioning this now is because at this point was the time when that actually first came to light. Okay,
and this is John McCain going out putting disinformation out there.
Hand delivered it to Comey.
Okay.
Anyways,
so much subversive stuff happened in the opposite direction of Donald Trump, but we're supposed to believe that he has subversive powers on his side.
Yeah. Ugh. Well, on December 9th, also that day, this was another Washington Post report. They reported that the CIA said that Russia. This was the biggest breaking news story that completely escalated the Russia narrative to the 10th degree.
Yeah.
This was when the Washington Post reported. They said the CIA said that Russia intervened in the election to try and help Trump. I specifically remember getting the breaking news notification on my phone when that happened. And all I could think was, oh my God, this is it. This is what I was telling people, is they're going to run with this Russia narrative.
Yes.
And ever since December 9th, the Russia hysteria has just been tenfold of everything it was during the election.
Oh yeah, and the thing about, the Russia hysteria is it's not so much that anyone has any sort of solid proof of any particular instance of a story. It's just the repeated barrage of here's a Trump-Russia story, here's a new Trump-Russia story, here's a new Trump-Russia story. It feeds into their bias that they already have against Donald Trump, where, they hate Donald Trump so much, if there's a bad story about them, they automatically believe it. And when it comes to this fake news stuff that, our mainstream media is putting out, these people don't see the retractions. They're not made to actually acknowledge a lot of the stuff that they're learning about this Trump-Russia collusion is garbage.
And 2 days later, on December 11th, Trump called the Washington Post report ridiculous and said it was an excuse that was made up by the Democrats. Now, in that book that was written that came out recently, that was about Hillary Clinton's campaign. Inside that book, I forget who wrote it or what it was called. I wish I would have written that down. But in that, they said that Hillary Clinton and her team made up the Russia story after she lost the election to try to, give it as a reason why she lost. when in reality, we know the reason why she lost. She wasn't a good candidate. She didn't have very good positions. She didn't campaign very well, especially in, some of the swing states. She didn't campaign at all in Wisconsin.
No, she never did a single speech in Wisconsin. Trump did around at least 10. I watched many of them, and as someone from Wisconsin, I have a vested interest to see where I'm from do well. Like, Wisconsin's done terribly under Barack Obama. Okay, Hillary Clinton's message is, "Oh, I'm more of the same." Mm-hmm. That's why Trump won Wisconsin.
She was the status quo candidate, and this was a change election.
Okay, Russia didn't make people in my hometown vote for Donald Trump. Okay, I know people that voted for Donald Trump that I grew up with, and it's just like, no Russian told them to do it. It's a big insult to all the people that had to put in time to campaign for Donald Trump, that advocated for him, that put themselves out on the line on social media or in person amongst people that are going to judge them because it's not popular to like Donald Trump. There's plenty of people that don't like me because I like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's very easy to lose friends if you like Donald
Trump. Who
Trump.
are these people? I want to find them.
Well,
they're unfriended now. Forget who they are. The way it should be.
Anyways, I'll get my investigators on that.
We'll continue to move on here. So, December 28th, there's a few things that happened right near the end of the year. But December 28th, Trump says that Americans should move past the Russian allegations, and he also started to distance himself from the Obama administration's sanctions on Russia.
This is where a lot of the controversy was coming around, because any talk of lessening sanctions was haram to these people.
And this is at the same time, I believe, when Michael Flynn was talking to the ambassador about just sanctions and other things in general.
Yeah, sanctions were mentioned, but it wasn't the only thing they're talking about.
Right. Now, the next day, December 29th, Obama expelled 35 Russian diplomats over Russian hacking in the election.
Yeah, he told all those people living in the United States, you have 48 hours to get everything that you have here in the country and leave.
Yeah.
That's not good for foreign relations, but apparently anything that's disparaging of Russia is okay. We're not supposed to get along? I don't know.
Now, 2 days later, December 31st, this is another time when the Washington Post was in super mass hysteria mode. And they published an article saying that Russia attempted to hack the Vermont power grid.
This is a big one.
And this was one of the biggest fake news stories of the year.
I've been told that the Vermont power grid includes 3 solar panels and 1 bonfire.
Sounds like my house.
and a windmill.
Oh, that's not at my house. But, this was very similar to the thing that happened in Florida. This was just a single laptop that got an infection, actually got a virus on it.
Now it's Russians.
And it's oh my God, it's the Russians. They tried to hack even though that, it's one laptop. And that laptop did not have access to actually change anything on the power grid. And I think that one, it actually was determined that, it originated from Russia. But even then, it's they're saying that, oh my God, they're trying to take down the power grid. Well, it's no.
They had to retract that story as well.
And they did. They did retract that story. Shortly after even. And I remember that story because they never contacted anybody that actually worked at that power plant. They didn't contact anyone for questioning. They didn't contact any police or anything. They got a little story and they, boom, ran with it. Yeah. And once all the people that were actually involved came out and said, yeah, no, this is completely fake, then they retracted their story. Hours later even. It wasn't even that long before they retracted it. It was just hours later because, boom, the story broke, and then people were like, no, this is fake. And 2 or 3 hours later, they retracted the story. But even then, the message had already gotten out.
Do these people have, editors and fact-checkers?
No, it's Washington Post. It's, the name tells you it's bullshit. But, and that was the last day of the year. So now we're finally up to 2017.
Yes.
January 3rd. Now, this was probably one of the most important interviews of the election cycle.
It was a great interview as well.
And I remember watching this on TV when it happened. This was when Sean Hannity interviewed Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy in London. Now, did you all watch that interview?
I watched it.
Of course, I'm a big fan of Julian Assange.
Of course. Now, in that interview, Sean Hannity directly asked him, he said, was Russia the source for the WikiLeaks emails? Assange said no. It was not Russia, and it was not a state source. Meaning it wasn't any other actual country's
It wasn't
government.
a state actor that they got it from.
Right. And that, you'd think that would be the end of this whole narrative, but, I mean, it continued from there. So anyways, at that point, we have Assange himself, the founder of WikiLeaks, saying, no, it was not Russia, people. So that was pretty important at that point. Now, 3 days after that, the U.S. intelligence community declassified a report saying that Russia tried to influence the election. Now, this is another one that super spread, and everyone on the left was like, here's your proof, here's your proof, here's your proof. And everyone on the right was like, did you not read the thing? This was one of those times when they had absolutely no evidence inside there.
Yeah.
And the quote-unquote evidence they had was stuff like that RT interview of Trump and Larry King. It was little stuff like that saying, well, because the fact that,
there was a Russian somewhere.
Russian TV channel had a Trump interview in it, or they had a commercial that made Trump look good, that's obviously the Russian government trying to influence the election to favor Donald Trump. That's the type of evidence that was actually in that document. They didn't have any actual physical evidence to say anything. And that's the one that everyone, even to this day, points to when they say, oh, our intelligence agencies believe it. Here's the report. No. Now, 4 days later, this was probably the peak of fake news. This was when BuzzFeed, we love BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed.
Also, CNN put out the story.
BuzzFeed put it out first, and then CNN ran with it directly afterwards.
Yeah.
BuzzFeed released the Steele dossier, the Golden Showers Trump document. And I mean, this thing was a 4chan prank. There's people that have evidence of.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing it physically on 4chan.
Yeah,
this was a created prank that they sent. I think originally they sent it out to Evan McMuffin.
Yes, they sent it to Evan McMullen, and there was one other guy. God, I forget his name. On Twitter, I think he blocked me.
I think it was Bill Kristol.
No, it wasn't Bill Kristol, but it was someone that was like him.
One of these never Trump.
Yeah, it was one of those guys. I remember because
it went from McMullen to McCain.
Yeah, and somehow McCain got his hand on it, and that's when we said that he had delivered that to Comey. Now, BuzzFeed released that document, and I mean, that thing's been picked apart, and that thing was literally complete fake. There was nothing real about it at all. And what's even worse is, even to this day, leftists will still, bring that up. They'll hold signs.
They joke about it.
In, rallies. Yeah. There'll be, Donald Trump in the pee-pee, ha-ha. It's like the left is obsessed with genitalia and, urine. That's because they're all mentally ill anyways. But
yeah,
that being said,
the big thing with the story was it claimed that the Russians had control over Donald Trump because they had compromising, I guess, footage or audio. It's because
they said that they had either footage or audio of Trump hiring hookers to pee on the bed of a hotel that Barack Obama stayed at one time in the same room. That was literally where all that PP golden shower stuff came from.
But the prostitutes had to refer to themselves. One was transgender or something.
I don't know.
The way that they wrote in the story, and one was Michelle, and then one was Obama. I gotta find the quotes on this stuff. This stuff is the greatest stuff ever.
Well, while you're looking that up, I'll go on to the next thing that we have.
Yeah, I'll find it for us.
So, 9 days later, January 19th, the day before the inauguration, the New York Times they publish a report saying that the FBI is leading an investigation into collusion between Trump and Russia. Now, Comey later, during his congressional testimony, called that fake news. But at that time, this was the last thing the Dems had before Trump was about to get inaugurated was by publishing this fake story about, oh my God, he's under investigation. Remember, he always said Clinton's under investigation. Now Trump's under investigation. Even though we know for a fact that Trump was at no time ever under investigation. And even the whole Mueller thing, there's been no actual, ever since they brought Mueller in as a special investigator, at no point has they ever actually, what's interesting about that whole thing is, at no point did they ever actually say that he is investigating solely Russia. We don't know exactly what he's investigating, who he's talked to, what evidence he's looked at, any of that stuff. And that's something worth thinking about once that whole thing ends. But that was their last-ditch effort before the inauguration.
Yeah.
And then the inauguration happened, and we all know what happened that day.
We can skip the Pissgate stuff. I think a lot of people already know it.
Yeah, so February of 2017, February 2nd. This doesn't really have anything to do with our election, but Germany released a statement saying that after an investigation, they found no evidence that Russia hacked their prior election that took place, I believe, in 2014, or it might have been 2015. But they had an investigation themselves, and they said, yeah, Russia didn't influence ours at all. And you think if Russia was going to influence any election, it would be Germany, of all countries, But that being said, so you want to say what happened next? February 13th.
February 13th. Oh, okay. February 13th was when Michael Flynn was fired for lying to Donald Trump and Mike Pence. This was like peak Russian narrative because it was the media that was, pushing it so hard that like, oh, he talked to the Russian ambassador, so I guess they worked with Russia because we can make guesses about things. I don't know. The thing is, like Michael Flynn didn't commit any crime.
He didn't do anything wrong,
and that's been acknowledged. And Donald Trump didn't fire him because of that. Because he didn't tell the truth.
Yeah, he lied to Mike Pence, and Trump didn't like that, so he fired him.
This is when stuff started really going to shit early on with the Donald Trump campaign, with the Russian narrative really slowing stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
Because first it started out with Flynn, and then it goes into Sessions, which we're going to talk about a little soon here.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that right now.
Okay, yeah.
So on March 2nd is when Jeff Sessions made the announcement that he was recusing himself from the Russian investigation.
Which was a terrible move.
Bad move.
Trump's still really mad about that right now as we're doing this show. And, he's considering replacing Sessions. Sessions didn't need to do this.
No, he didn't.
He made it seem like there was something to hide by recusing himself. It was a frustrating moment.
But, yeah, it was frustrating. But 5 days later, March 7th, 2017, this was the next big WikiLeaks release. This was Vault 7. Now, you know a lot about Vault 7.
Yeah, so I think the thing that we learned from Vault 7, which is the most important and most pertinent to this episode, is through Vault 7 we learned that our intelligence agencies have created devices which can hack devices, and make it look like a foreign country's doing it. So, if our entire intelligence agency is so anti-Russia, who's to say that they're not creating their own evidence so that they can take further action against Russians? This is just something that does exist.
They just want to set them up. It's an inside job.
It's not to say that that's what happened, but it definitely could have. And this is also, the same Vault 7 is when we started seeing that, like, our own State Department, our own...
CIA?
I think it was CIA or Homeland Security. They were actually, like, putting listening devices in public consumer products. I know a big one was like a TV that was being sold out of the box with recording listening devices for the government to spy on people.
I believe that's the NSA.
Yeah, that was the NSA, not DHS.
Yeah, getting confused. So many different departments. But, yeah, I think those are the things that we saw out of Vault 7, which was most pertinent. There's also a lot of other stuff. You can talk about Vault 7 for hours.
Yeah, that was definitely the most important. But the next thing that came up was... in April of 2017. Now, we don't actually have an exact date for this, but the CIA director, Mike Pompeo, he made a statement saying that RT was helping give information to WikiLeaks. Now, Mike Pompeo said that without any evidence. And
Just making a statement.
And it was at that time where a lot of Trump people who are pretty pro WikiLeaks were like, Trump, why is your administration, talking smack about WikiLeaks? They helped you win. And it's just interesting that Mike Pompeo would say that, like I said, without evidence. And then in the month of May 9th specifically,
Yes.
this is when more things changed. This is when Trump fired Comey. Now, when Trump fired Comey, every single person who likes Trump was extremely happy that happened.
I loved it.
Like,
It was the
our
best.
only regret was that our only thing that made us mad was the fact they didn't do it sooner.
Yeah.
He should have done it day
They shouldn't
one.
have let him come into the administration.
But that being said, we're still happy that it happened nonetheless. And the left went into an uproar about that, saying, oh my God, the FBI is investigating this Russia thing. You're firing Comey. You're disrupting this investigation. You definitely have something to hide. Which was, completely retarded and stupid. But
I think it was them a couple months before who wanted to can Comey.
yeah, they did hate Comey. They hated Comey when Comey, refused to invest.
He reopened the investigation on Hillary right prior to the election.
Yeah, and they're like, Comey needs to go. He's obviously being partisan. So it's like, the left showed that they were just complete hypocrites. Now, on May 26th, a couple of weeks later, the Washington Post, reported that Jared Kushner tried to set up those secret channels with Russia on December 1st. Now, as we've already covered, that meeting took place, but they never discussed secret channels. And even if they did, it would have been okay. It's been done in the past, and it's legal.
Yeah, it's nothing
So,
significant.
All it does is just, like you've been saying, anytime there's a person with a Russian name or is linked to Russia, you can't talk to those people.
Not allowed. No Russians. So the next thing that we have here is June 1st of 2017. France reported that they didn't find any evidence of the Russians hacking their elections at all.
And again, you'd think that if Russia was going to hack any elections, it would be like European countries.
This was the 2017 French election.
Right. When Macron beat Le Pen.
Which, it was actually kind of interesting. We were very in-depth on that election on the program. And they were actually trying to do like a Russian collusion narrative with Marine Le Pen as well. Because no one, would fundraise her within Europe because, to have her political stance is like double negative bad in most people's eyes. So the only loan that she could get to fundraise her campaign was from a Russian bank. So, they have that suspicion. And the day before the French election, there was those leaks emails with Macron, and they're saying, oh, the Russians are about to subvert our election, And then the French themselves say, like, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
People get themselves worked up about Russians that don't exist.
I mean, it is hysteria. But a couple of days after that, on June 3rd, do you remember Reality Winner?
Of course I remember Reality Winner. She's a winner.
She was the NSA leaker who was arrested for leaking documents, including one of those documents was one of those CIA documents that said that the Russians were attempting to influence the election. That was another one of those documents that was very similar to the last one that had no proof to it.
Yeah.
There was nothing in there. But, at this point, we were dealing with a lot of leaks that were coming out of the government, and, she was the one that was behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, on June 5th, this is what we wanted to get to. So, on June 5th...
Jesse Ventura, do you need to go soon?
I could stay for a couple more minutes. I was going to motorcycle out of town and maybe do some rock climbing or something, but this is too interesting. I need to get to the bottom of this, so I'm going to stick it out.
All right.
Yeah.
Well...
Need the information.
Yep.
Fighting those InfoWars.
Anyways, on June 5th, Megyn Kelly sat down with an interview with Vladimir Putin. Now, we have the text of this interview here. Did we actually copy it, or are we just going to... Yeah, we're going to read part of it. So, we're just going to read a few excerpts of it. Now, Enzo, you are going to be playing Megyn Kelly, right?
Kelly.
And I'm going to be playing Vladimir Putin. So we're just going to read maybe just like the first maybe line or so.
Okay.
So, go.
President Putin You have repeatedly and passionately denied that Russia was behind the interference with our American presidential election, including on stage at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. But as you know, the consensus view in the United States is that you did it. That's what the 17 intelligence agencies concluded, and that's what the Republicans and the Democrats on the congressional oversight committees who have seen the classified reports have said. Are they all lying?
They have been misled, and they are not analyzing the information in its entirety. I have not once seen any direct proof of Russia's interference in the presidential election in the USA. We have talked about it with former President Obama and several other officials. No one ever showed me any direct evidence. So anyways, the interview goes on and it goes on for a while, but, we just, Vladimir Putin completely just, beat her to the ground. It was a great interview.
This wasn't the interview where she was on the panel.
No, this was the personal interview. The panel one was even better.
The panel one was good as well. I forget when that happened. But the panel
one... It was a little while
one...
later. It's a couple days.
Oh, is that on the timeline?
No, it just happened a couple days later.
Okay. When she was on the panel, she's asking Vladimir Putin all this stuff like, oh, you wanted Trump to win. And Vladimir Putin says, we don't concern ourselves with how American elections go. We have a general consensus on how things work in the United States. There's a false illusion between the left and the right. And actually, they work very singular in issues regarding countries like Russia. So, we were ready for Hillary Clinton. We were ready for Trump. It really didn't matter to us. We knew that you guys were going to be anti-Russia anyways.
Now, there was one more question that Megyn Kelly had asked Putin later. And I'm not going to make you read it, but she was talking about when the ambassadors were meeting with some of the Trump transition team. And I just want to say what Vladimir Putin said in response. Okay. He said, listen, and she's talking about the Russian ambassador. She says, listen, his boss is the foreign minister. Do you think that I have the time to talk to our ambassadors all over the world every day? This is nonsense. Don't you understand that this is just some kind of nonsense? I don't even know with whom he met there. Has there been anything, something out of the ordinary? Something remarkable? He, of course, would have advised the minister, and the minister would have informed me. Nothing of that happened. So Putin himself is stating on the record that the ambassadors were not talking to Putin, trying to give information to Trump.
And the absurd thing is, the point of having ambassadors so that you can talk to people in the Russian government.
Dear God! Ambassadors talking to each other. I've got to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, it's such a scandal that, the ambassador for Russia that lives in the United States to represent Russia talks to people
in the United States
government.
Ambassadoring all over the place.
But
I hate this Russian narrative so much. We gotta talk about this stuff.
Yeah. The next thing that's up is when Comey testified in front of Congress. He testified in front of Congress on June 11th. Now, we have several excerpts from that interview that we want to read, and this might take a couple of minutes to get through. So, are you ready to do this?
Jesse Ventura, did you want to do some of the reading for this stuff, or should I?
I'll be happy to do some reading. Who would you like me to read for?
You could do the Burr one that we have to start out with.
Okay, so you're going to be Burr, and I'm going to play Comey. Now, we don't really
What kind of guy is Burr?
He's just Burr.
He's just a pencil-neck bureaucrat? What is he? Is he a journalist?
I forget.
I'm gonna play
Aaron Burr? Like the guy who was in the duel?
Yes. So I'm going to play Comey, and there's a few people he interviews here, Burr, but we're just going to keep going through these. So, Burr, if you will.
Do you have any doubt that Russia attempted to interfere in the 2016 elections?
None.
Do you have any doubt that the Russian government was behind the intrusions on the DCCC systems and the subsequent leaks of that information?
No. No doubt.
Do you have any doubt the Russian government was behind the cyber intrusion in the state voter files?
No.
Are you confident that no votes cast in the 2016 election were altered?
I'm confident. When I left as director, I had seen no indication of that whatsoever.
Director Comey, did the president at any time ask you to stop the FBI investigation into Russian involvement in the 2016 U.S. elections?
Not to my understanding, no.
Did any individual working for this administration, including the Justice Department, ask you to stop the Russian investigation?
No.
Director, the term we hear most often is collusion. When people are describing possible links between the American and Russian governments, entities related to the interference in our election, would you say that it's normal for foreign governments to reach out to members of an incoming administration?
Yes.
Hmm.
The next person we have up is Rish, or Reich. I don't know how you pronounce it. I don't care.
Yeah.
But, you ready?
You want to do a different voice?
Yeah,
The
try it.
chairman walked you through a number of things that the American people need to know and want to know. Number one, obviously, we all know about the active measures that the Russians have taken. I think a lot of people were surprised at this. Those of us that work in the intelligence community, it didn't come as a surprise, but now the American people know this. And it's good they know this, because this is a serious problem. I think, secondly, I gather from all that you're willing to say now that you were the director. While you were the director, the President of the United States was not under investigation. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct.
So these three things we know regarding the active measures, whether the president is under investigation and the collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, I want to drill it right down, as my time is limited, to the most recent dust-up regarding allegations that the President of the United States obstructed justice. Boy, you nailed this down on page 5, paragraph 3. You put this in quotes, and words matter. You wrote down the words, so we could all have the words in front of us now. There's 28 words now in quotes. It says, quote, I hope this president, the speaking president, I hope you can see you're clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go. Now, are those his exact words? Is that correct?
Correct.
You wrote them here and put them in quotes?
Correct.
Thank you for that. Did he not direct you to let it go?
Not in his words, no.
Did he not order you to let it go?
Again, those words are not in order. The next person we have up is Heinrich.
I could do it since
You want to do
it's super
Heinrich?
short.
All right, go ahead, do Heinrich.
Okay. Did the president in any of those interactions that those shared with us today ask you what you should be doing or what our government should be doing or the intelligence community to protect America against Russian interference in our elections?
I don't recall a conversation like that.
Never?
No. Next person we have up is King. I believe this is Congressman Steve King, if I'm not mistaken.
Congressman Steve King?
Or Senator? I don't know.
No, it's Congressman.
The
He's
one
from,
with the jowls.
He's the
Yeah.
best one.
All right, go ahead.
Back to Mr. Flynn. Would that's how he actually said
Yeah.
it. Would closing out the Flynn investigation have impeded the overall Russian investigation?
No.
So then,
Next one, Senator Tom Cotton.
Senator Tom Cotton. Let's turn our attention to the underlying activity at issue here. Russia's hacking of those emails and the allegations of collusion. Do you think Donald Trump colluded with Russia?
That's a question I don't think I should answer in an open setting. As I said, when I left, we did not have an investigation focused on President Trump. But that's a question that will be answered by the investigation, I think.
Okay, and then the last one is from Senator Kamala Harris.
Oh, God.
Let's see if I can...
I was gonna do that for
I don't want to be a woman.
I mean, who's gonna do that voice?
Someone's got to do it.
Do you know if the Attorney General was involved in any aspect of the Russian investigation after the 2nd of March?
I don't. I would assume not. Let me say this way. I don't know any information that would lead me to believe he did something to touch the Russian investigation after recusal.
I hope that was a good Kamala Harris. I forget what she sounds
Oh,
like.
you did perfect, Enzo, don't worry. So that was,
That was comical, but it was poignant.
every single time you noticed there, though. They asked Comey multiple times, was Trump under investigation? No. Did Russia interfere in the election? He said, I don't know. Did Trump have any communications with Russia during the campaign? No. These questions come up, they answered them, and at that point, the Russian narrative seemed to die off, at least for a while.
It was dead for a couple weeks.
It was dead for a couple weeks. And, we kind of figured it was going to come back up because, the left is not going to just let it go.
There's no way they're going to let it go.
But that ended it for a while. And it was hilarious when that happened because, bars in D.C. were opening early. And people were, going there pretending it was, the Super Bowl.
Those photos are amazing.
And then they, realized, he's helping Trump, not hurting him. Because they thought this was going to be the downfall of Trump. Comey's going to bring down Trump.
I thought this was what was going to lead to impeachment.
Yeah. But instead, it just, proved Trump right the entire time.
Yeah.
And then the very next day, on June 26th, there was a false story that
No,
was...
you didn't read this June 25th.
Oh, I'm so sorry. June 25th, okay. And remember, in that testimony, Comey was asked about the January 19th New York Times report, and Comey called it fake news. He said this is fake. And it was on June 25th, 2 weeks after Comey testifies, the New York Times finally issued a retraction from that story. That was the story that claimed that 17 U.S. intelligence agencies agreed that Russia was behind meddling efforts. Instead, they said, okay, it was actually 3 or 4. Now, if you remember, during I think it was the second or third presidential debate, Trump made a statement in there saying that it was only 3 intelligence agencies, not 17. And they said he was lying. Well, it turns out he was right. And Hillary Clinton, who said 17, she was the one that was wrong. Because they're all going after these reports.
But I guess I bet you Snopes reported that Hillary was correct.
Oh, Snopes probably did. Snopes is actually, they're asking for donations now in order to stay as a website. That's how bad they are.
I saw that.
Anyways, that's off topic. But the New York Times issued that retraction. Then on the 26th, there was a false story that was linking Trump to Russia that was published by CNN. It was also one of those stories that had an anonymous source. Now, all these stories have an anonymous source. Now, 3 CNN journalists actually resigned because of this. Now,
well, we reported this at the time.
Yeah.
They claimed that they resigned, but truly they were fired.
they were.
Just CNN wanted to make it look a little nicer.
Yeah. So, this was at the point where, the Russian narrative was really kind of starting to fall apart. Stuff was getting retracted. People were getting fired. And then on the 27th, American Bravada was released, part 1. This was Project Veritas. Now, this is the first video of American Bravada that was made by James O'Keefe with the hidden cameras with the different CNN people.
Going into, check on CNN stuff.
The very first one was the most important that had to do with Russia because there was a CNN producer on camera who was asked about the Russia story. And he says, and he admitted, that it's mostly bullshit and it's all about ratings. That they were literally saying there's a reason why 90% of what CNN talks about is Russia, and that's because it's just simply for ratings, and they're making the stuff up. It's all fake.
And then the second video that came out was Van Jones, who said that the Russia stuff is pretty much a nothing burger.
Yeah.
And then the third one, the guy was talking to, they were talking about how they received word from upper who's the guy that owns CNN?
Ted Turner.
Zucker.
Zucker. Yes, it was around the Paris climate thing that he used the example. They reported about the Paris Climate Accord when Trump pulled out of it for like a day and a half, and then they were immediately told by Zucker, go right back to Russia.
Yep.
Go right back to Russia, because that's where the ratings are, and CNN's been dropping in the ratings, so I don't know what they're talking about, but it's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Now, the next thing that we have, I'm actually adding something as we speak, but early in July, after all the Project Veritas videos were released, after Comey's testimony, the entire Russian narrative seemed dead for a while, and then you had Donald Trump Jr.,
Which we've talked about.
which we've already talked about, and how that story broke, said, oh my God, he met with the Russian lawyer, blah, 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 blah.
But the Don Jr. stuff was actually pretty convincing to the public. There's polls
was.
that say like 80% of Americans like disapprove of what Donald Trump Jr. was doing.
Yeah. I mean, Trump Jr. himself even said, he was talking to Hannity, he said, yeah, if I could do it over again, I would. With the information he knows
But
now.
this is pre-Russia hysteria. He didn't have any idea that this stuff would end up this way.
Of course not. And but that reunited the whole Russian narrative, and now the people are talking about it again.
Now there's people testifying again.
Yep. And I think it was Paul Manafort was set to testify. The Senate Judiciary Committee actually pulled his testimony, pulled his subpoena. So he's no longer going to be testifying anymore.
But
there's no reason they would do that if they. The only reason they would pull that is if they believed he didn't have any information.
Yeah.
So like we said, they've got nothing. And the last thing that we have on our list before we close out here, July 24th, this was just a couple days ago, Jared Kushner had a press conference. He released a statement. He equivocally said he did not collude with Russia. And I'm going to kind of read through a couple of the things he said. But he specifically said, I did not collude with Russia. The Trump campaign did not collude with Russia. And he even said that even the meetings that they did have with any Russian ambassadors or Russian-connected individuals, they were all nothing burgers, which is kind of, using the same phrase that Van Jones used. He said the first time he ever talked with the Russian ambassador, the meeting lasted for less than 1 minute. You're not going to be able to, collude with people if all you do is talk for just less than a minute.
Yeah.
That's not how things work. Reuters even alleged that he had calls with the Russian ambassador, but there's no evidence to show that he had those calls. And he said that those calls, or at least the story talking about those calls, was fake news. He also said that the Donald Trump Jr. meeting that we've just talked about was completely overblown. He said it was ridiculous, and this is like you said, he left after like 5 minutes because the meeting there was nothing there.
Well, I think we've learned an important lesson here today, folks. Don't talk to Russians. And if you still don't talk to Russians, they still might make it seem like you were talking to Russians.
Exactly.
Yep.
And talking to Russians means collusion.
And he also went on to say that that secret back channel meeting, that's not what they talked about, but we already said that. There's also apparently he received a gift from some Russian guy, but it was like a misleading thing, or I don't know. I don't even care at this point. But yeah, that's pretty much what he said. He also said Donald Trump won not because of collusion, but because he ran the better campaign. But we knew that.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it, I think. That's where we stand today with the whole Russian narrative.
That brings us up to where we are. That statement was from just 2 days ago. Mm-hmm. That's the entire Russian narrative from its inception to where we currently are. Hopefully we made it as coherent as possible and could. It was kind of a hard thing to work on.
Yeah, there's so many stories that are published later talking about previous events. And you got to put.
And then you remember things that like you didn't even remember until you're doing this. But
I'd just like to say one last thing. To this date, there has still been zero evidence put forward to show that either A, Trump colluded with Russia to try to win, B, the Russian government was trying to help get Trump elected, or C, the Russian government intervened in the election or hacked in the election. There's absolutely no evidence for any of that that's ever actually been provided.
Yeah. And, if these people feel that we've been talking about this thing for over a year and a half now, and not a single person has been, stating a statute of which any single person of the Trump campaign violated, which would cause them to go to jail. So if they're not doing anything criminal, what are we even talking about? You're investigating nothing.
Well, then why the hell did you bring me in here?
Because this is about conspiracies.
Oh, well, I can't pass those up. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'll continue to serve this country and many other countries. Come see me. I'll be a chef this summer on the Carnival Cruise Lines, serving many countries. Jesse Ventura, out.
Well,
Goodbye,
thank you,
Mr.
Jesse.
Ventura. But, Bobby, are there any other final statements you want to say on this Russia stuff before we go?
Well, I just want to say that it's not over. I'll tell you that.
It's not over.
It's not over.
We'll be talking about it on Sunday.
They're going to harp this thing all the way till 2020 and beyond.
Yes.
And it's never going to end. They're never going to provide evidence. They're just going to keep it going. It's so unfortunate that so much of the public actually believes this stuff.
Yeah.
But
I guess in my final statement, both me and you, Bobby, we do take a more pro-Russian stance than most people because we won't have good relations with Russia. And for so many people, they've done polling. 60% of Americans see Russia as the enemy. Russia has never done anything to me or you. Okay, when they play up like Russian aggression, you look at United States bases all around Russia. We encircle the entire country. What are they talking about? Russia has the economy the size of Italy. Okay, they can't take us. They're not a threat to us. And you want to talk about, hacking elections. The United States has been behind plenty of those. So who are we to say, who are we to judge the world when we're one of the biggest culprits of this with our own intelligence agencies? The Russian narrative is dumb. It's stupid. Donald Trump didn't win the election because of Russia. I didn't vote for Donald Trump because Russians told me to do it. You didn't. I don't know anyone that did. And, yeah, I guess that's it for me.
I guess.
With that said, I hope you enjoyed our episode on the Russian narrative, Russian conspiracies this week, and have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.